Hi, I'm Casandra Karl, and I'm an ordinary Hoosier. It's weird because I don't think of myself as a Hoosier, but okay. Because I'm a fairly recent transplant, so I don't think of myself as a true Hoosier. I don't even like basketball. I know, I don't know what I'm doing here. They're gonna kick me out. I'm originally from Wisconsin, but I've lived a lot of different places. I lived in Atlanta for a while. I lived in Israel. I lived in Detroit. And most recently I lived in very far south Texas, right on the border with Mexico. I'm a consultant. I do consulting for museums developing educational programming and interpretive display, mostly. I also am director of children's ministry at a local church, which is also sort of a kind of educational programming, I suppose. But I stay home with my 3 kids and spend as much time with them as I can. I worked as an archaeologist for a long time. Well, it seems like a long time. Maybe it was only 5 or 6 years. And then kind of realized that that profession is not conducive to settling down, getting married, having a family, all of those things. It just requires so much travel. It's so physical. I love the idea of sharing history. I especially really like working with small organizations because I find that a lot of people don't know their own history. And knowing your own history makes you much more sensitive and much more in tune with other people who might be experiencing those same things today. When I was in college, I did an internship at a morgue because I did my senior thesis on tuberculosis in prehistoric populations, and in order to identify tuberculosis in prehistoric populations, you have to be able to identify it in modern populations. So I would hang around the morgue waiting for somebody with tuberculosis to come in and then watch the autopsy. I am a bit of a nut for like weird medical practices. I really am fascinated by things like bloodletting, things like cures for old-timey cures for diseases. Syphilis used to be treated with mercury. Like you would just spread mercury on your syphilis chancres. I just think that kind of thing is so interesting. I'm not just a history nerd, I'm also a science nerd and just an all-around kind of nerd. Not so much Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm a Star Trek nerd. I play Dungeons and Dragons. Even though I'm 42 years old. I played football as a child. I was a football player. My dad really badly wanted me to be the first female player in the NFL. That didn't work out because I'm 5'3" and like, you know, $130 on a good day. So that didn't happen. But the fact that, you know, I think all parents tell their kids, oh, you can be anything, you can be anything. But most of us don't really mean it. I think he really meant it. Like, he really thought I could be a football player. The reason that I wanted to share the art of Papel Picado is it's something that I think is unusual, especially in this area. There is a substantial Hispanic population in some of the major cities in Indiana, but in rural Indiana, many people of Mexican heritage are so far removed from their Mexican roots that I thought this is something that most Hoosiers, especially in rural areas, are not going to learn otherwise. So I thought it'd be interesting. Papel Picado is a form of Mexican art that translated means punched paper. It's been around since the time of the Aztecs, but became very popular around the time of the United States Civil War. In Mexico. It is now done mostly by die cut, but there are still a few artists in Puebla, the state of Puebla in Mexico, who do it by hand. They design their own patterns and even make their own chisels. This is what you're going to need. to make traditional papel picado. You're going to need paper. I'm actually using an origami paper, but any Chinese paper will do. Papel picado looks like it's made out of tissue paper, but the tissue paper that you use for traditional papel picado is actually a glazed crepe paper, which is incredibly difficult to find here in Indiana. Origami paper is the closest thing that I've found. Now this is the pattern that I created. As you can see, I'm not a great artist. Great papel picado artists will make very lacy, intricate patterns. I'm going to do a basic, what's called a calavera. Calaveras are the skulls that you see at Dia de los Muertos, or the Festival of the Dead in Mexico. And that's one of the main places that you're going to see papel picado. You're also going to need tape. I like masking tape, but painter's tape or any kind of tape that is going to easily come off. Obviously a pencil to draw your pattern. You're also going to need a mallet, a chisel. I actually have a chisel blade on an X-Acto knife. A real papel picado artist is going to make their own chisels by heating large 6 to 8 inch steel or iron nails and forming the chisel custom to the curvature that they're going to be using on their paper. The mat that I'm using is just a regular craft cutting or fabric cutting mat. Traditional papel picado artists would use a sheet of lead. The lead would allow the chisel to go all the way through the paper and enter the lead to make sure that you get a clean cut. But lead is A, toxic, B, not easy to come by in southern Indiana. So I'm going to use this cutting mat instead, which does absorb the chisel a little bit. So it should serve the same purpose. So the first thing that I'm going to do is choose my paper. A really talented papel picado artist can do up to about 50 sheets of paper at a time. Because I am using, my tool is not quite as sturdy as a normal papel picado chisel, I am going to use a little bit less than that. Place your pattern on the top. And then I've got probably about a ½ inch or so around each edge that I can play with on this pattern. I'm also going to tape it on only 3 sides. You want to get that tape into there as tightly as you can. Okay. Do the other side. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to very carefully line up your chisel, and then you're just going to pound it until you feel the resistance of the cutting mat. Not quite sure I'm there. Okay. And then you pull it out, remove it. The cutting mat is not exactly the right tool for this job. It's not providing as much resistance as the lead would, but if you don't care about your table, it'll work just fine. Okay, and then you're going to do that, and you're going to move on to the next square. Okay, now when you get to the skull or calavera, what you're going to do is follow the curve of that, but you're also going to cut out the square, just as you would and I've got a little bit, I went a little bit too far there, but okay. And then at the end, this is still attached by just a little bit, so at the end I'm probably just going to kind of shave away that paper very gently, either with the chisel, or you could put a different blade on the X-Acto knife if you're using an X-Acto knife. I've always been kind of fascinated with the things that are the same between peoples who think that they're very different. So when we lived in South Texas. We actually lived in a town called Mission. I got a job there as the director of the local historical society, which just kind of required me to learn a lot about the culture and about the history. I just found myself in a really kind of unique position where people in that area who were Mexican American had been so deliberately and consciously Americanized. They were so American that they had really lost a lot of their Mexican heritage. And I thought it was part of my job as, you know, the leader of history in that community to kind of help reclaim some of that. A lot of Mexican American kids don't even speak Spanish, which is kind of unfortunate, because when you lose a language, you lose the ability to describe certain things that are common to your culture. I think by knowing your own heritage, you understand what other people maybe are going through, or maybe their situation a little bit better. So you can see that I'm not really using the hammer, I'm just wiggling the chisel. If I was the type to make my own chisels, I could make a very tiny chisel specifically for this purpose. And that's what, you know, an artist, somebody who does this for a living, would do. Now, here's kind of the thing. In order to get the lacy effect on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut just a very thin segment right there. Okay, and when I remove that, it's not going to really change the pattern, but it's going to give it that hole, so when you hold it up to the light, you'll be able to see it. The nose holes are going to be a little bit larger than they probably should be. Once you get the basic hash work, you kind of eyeball it and see where there's too much paper, and you start kind of trying to cut it away. I'm just going to kind of rock it like this, where I need a little extra. But, well, maybe I'll go back to that with the chisel. This is a little bit, the work on the center is a little bit more precise than the squares on the edges. So I'm going to go back to that with the chisel. Do the noses. This eye is almost done. I might have to go over it with the really pointed one also, but alright, so I just cut along the edges of the tape, and it's important that you use a tape that you can easily cut through, not duct tape or something. So I cut along the edges of the tape, and then I'm going to kind of pull the whole thing up. You can take the pattern piece off, you don't really need it anymore. And then, as you can see, there are some, there it is, lost my knife. There are some little bits that are kind of hanging there. You want to just gently poke through. Now we have a whole bunch of these little banderitas, all different colors. We've got some blue and we've got some purple. We've got some green and some yellow. And the only thing that's left to do is to fold this. Then you're going to run a bead of glue along the inside, press it down so the little channel in there, and then once it's dry, you slide them all on a string, and you've got Papel Picado. For a series called Ordinary Hoosiers, nobody's ordinary. I mean, everybody's ordinary, but also nobody's ordinary. Everybody that I have met ever, if they want to tell it, they have a story. And I think maybe I am exceptional in the sense that I am willing to tell my story to a camera, but every Hoosier has something about them that's extraordinary. Not just a craft, something in their upbringing, a belief, conviction, even a talent or a skill. So I guess I guess I am an ordinary Hoosier, but I feel like all Hoosiers are extraordinary.